Welcome back to Self-Care, Sound Mind, the podcast and live series. I'm Kiera Moore, and we are here for episode 4. I'm super excited for my special guest, Miss Stephanie Proctor. Stephanie is a child and adolescent therapist and has been doing this for 21 years. Tonight, we're going to talk about children and mental health. Hey everybody, Kiera Moore here. I am super excited. I am so excited for episode 4 of Self-Care, Sound Mind, the podcast and live series. So we are going to jump right into it, but as usual, I have a couple announcements. So again, this is Self-Care, Sound Mind, the podcast and live series, and I'm going to come to you every 2 weeks with all things mental health. We're going to talk about various aspects of mental health therapy and resources to help you and your family. And my goal, as always, is to uplift, empower, and to encourage. You know, self-care is my thing, so I'm going to make sure you are right in order to hold myself accountable as well. So tonight, I am so excited about my guest. So let me get these announcements out the way. So first things first, Kiera Moore Therapeutic Services and Embracing Oak Therapy. Those are my 2 practices, and I am super excited about the work we are doing. Embracing Oak Therapy is my newest venture where I have wonderful therapists on staff with me, and they are available, and we are super excited to announce that we can now take Highmark and Highmark Health options. So we've added a new insurance contract, so we can currently take AmeriHealth Caritas, Highmark Health options, and as usual, self-pay. You know, one of my goals is to provide affordable mental health therapy, and we have our free therapy campaign going on. So if you would like, you can go directly to embracingoak.com to donate to our free therapy campaign, or you can purchase a shirt with a purpose. This wonderful shirt here that says Tender Loving Self-Care, it is $20 and all proceeds go to our free therapy campaign. That can also be purchased at embracingoak.com. As usual, I'll put the links in the comment section. I do have something else coming up, and I want to get your feedback. I want to host a self-esteem workshop. I want to do a day for teens and a day for adults. If you are interested, drop a yes, a thumbs up, a like, or something in the comment section and let me know you're interested, okay? I believe those are all of my announcements. If you would like your self-care product to be featured on the show, don't forget that you can email me. You can send that to kmore at embracingoak.com. You can let me know about your product, whether it's like body butter, bath bombs, if it's a t-shirt with an encouraging message, anything like that. Whatever, essential oils, stuff like that, anything self-care related, I want to show it and showcase it, okay? So let's talk about children, adolescents, teenagers. Woo! Let's invite my special guest, Miss Stephanie Proctor. She is a mental health therapist, and she has been working, listen, I've been working with kids for a long time, and honey, I don't know how she has made it to 21 years of working with children and families, and she works with the toughest cases of all. Let's welcome Stephanie Proctor to the show. Hey, Steph.
Hey, hello.
Stephanie is my good friend. We work together. She's an awesome, amazing resource, and she's just so full of knowledge. And can we just talk about this 21 years? Talk about longevity. Talk about how to work with children for 21 years?
So it's actually very interesting. I was just talking about this with somebody else. So I literally was on the cusp of graduating with my bachelor's from, it was Wilmington College at the time before it became Wilmington University. And I had applied at Delaware Guidance. There was an opening for a day treatment therapist. And so that time, day treatment at Delaware Guidance, they had still various locations, two up north, but the way that they did things were a little bit different than they do now. And so I had offered, gone for an application to sign up to work there. And I was able to get the job right on the spot after I did my interview. And they called me and were like, we think you're great. Start now. And working in day treatment, that literally was kind of like the moment where it was like, is this what I want to be doing? Because the day treatment facility was kids that were severely suffering with behavioral issues that were impacting them to not be able to stay at their regular schools. So these were all those kids that were like severely acting out. And so I started there in April of 2000. And I did that for about 5 years. And then I was like, you know what? I was encouraged by the program director at the time. He was like, you're really good at this. Don't you want to continue to get your master's? And I was like, yes, I think so. So I'd gone back and I'd gone to Delaware State University to get my master's. And during that time, I was still working in day treatment. And then once I finished my master's degree, I then applied for the crisis position at Delaware Guidance. So I just kind of went from one program and just kind of transferred over and started working there because I'd done my internship in the crisis department. And I really liked that aspect of like assessing kids. Like,
so you like all the hard stuff, in other words. The most severe cases, the crisis cases, and now what are you doing now?
So now I'm in family-based. So I am a family-based supervisor, but I'm kind of doing a hybrid right now because of everything that's happened. So I'm actually seeing a full caseload and doing the family therapy work with these children.
So with you and your you seem to like the hard ones, right? And so with family-based, that's a pretty high level of care too, right?
Absolutely.
So let's just jump right into it. So first of all, from the moment I feel like from the moment we met, you're like, I wish I could take these families, put them in a house, lock them in, and just work on all the issues. And so although we're not locking them in, family-based is pretty intense, right? So for someone who doesn't know what we mean by family-based therapy, can you just explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So family-based therapy is a type of therapy that's evidence-based, and it's focused off of systemic therapy. And it actually came from Philadelphia. So
big up to Philly.
So it is actually a program where they follow a specific model, ecosystemic structural family therapy model, where it incorporates intense family therapy, working with not only the identified client, but also the whole family. And so it looks at it from a systems perspective, instead of it looking at an individual perspective, to where we're helping to address the issues that may be impacting one child, but we're recognizing that it's impacting the whole family. And so we're incorporating everybody, not just only the family members, but like schools, anybody.
So one of the reasons I absolutely love that is because my internship in grad school was at, I don't want to say where it was at, but because I don't want them to take offense to my comment. But I worked with children, and I remember being like, I am never working with children again. I ain't doing this. Mind you, my whole life, all I do is work with kids. But thank God for private practice where I can see the people I want to see. But so no, I am not currently accepting any children or teenagers. I am only accepting adults at this point. But that's because I see kids all day in my full-time job. But anyway, so my thing was I never wanted to work with kids again because I felt like it was super unproductive because some of the kids would come from school with like case managers to the office and then go back to school, never interacting with the family, never being able to engage with parents. And I just felt like this is so counterproductive. We're doing all this work to address behaviors and then we're sending them right back into the environment, which is unproductive. No more or less unproductive than helping an addict and then sending them back to where they do the drugs, and sending them back into that environment. So one of the reasons when I did first start working at Delaware Guidance and IOP, I was super excited about the involvement that had to take place with the family. So with family-based, but that was just involvement. Like we did some family sessions, but with family-based, it's like, oh no, boo-boo. Johnny might have a problem. We're working on all of y'all.
All of it. Yes. We're getting the quiet people. We're getting the people that are sitting off to the side that want to not say anything or just chime in every now and then. Oh, okay. Well, tell me what you mean by this, or what are your thoughts about this? Oh, no.
People to say it's all them and don't want to take no responsibility, accountability for their actions. And they the ones setting them off.
Yes.
Those people.
Yes, absolutely.
So what have you noticed? And I know family-based is very specific, but have you noticed maybe a change in some of the concerns based off of like the impact from COVID? Or do you notice that it's still like your normal family-based kind of stuff?
No, it's definitely impacting them more. Definitely. We have, without getting into too much detail, some of our families aren't able to go to the schools because of their own personal, reasons, maybe their own health reasons and things like that. And so they're having to choose the option of staying home and doing remote learning. And so because of that limited restriction, it's causing them to feel more kind of like isolated and stuck. Yeah. And it's actually causing more increase in the anxiety and the depression because they're not able to utilize those outlets of being socially around other peers, other students, and just having day-to-day interaction like they would normally have if they're going to school versus they're just confined to the immediate family members every single day, constantly.
And for family-based, I would assume that is even more triggering than, someone I would see an outpatient, because usually that's where most of the problems are. So and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, and, talking about children and adolescents, is that they already have a limited amount of control. Like when we talk about our control bubbles, right? Like we know the things we can control, the things we don't control.
Absolutely.
As adults, our bubble's a lot bigger than a child, right? And so if we're having a hard time, what do you think children are going to do?
Absolutely.
At least we could leave and go to the grocery store if we wanted to. They couldn't do anything. They had no choice in the matter. So when you're talking about a kid who already has pretty severe emotional feelings and behavioral issues and all that kind of stuff, and then you're forcing them to stay not only isolated from friends and family, but around the actual trigger. So let's talk to parents for a minute. And what are some things that we could share with parents who may notice that their child is a little different due to the pandemic? Maybe they're isolating in their room, or they're not hanging with family more, or, they're just having some emotional changes. What do you say to the parent who's just noticing that?
I first would say that that's great that they're noticing it, because a lot of times that's been the struggle, is the parents aren't able to recognize it. So that's even a plus and a positive if they're even able to notice it, because that's half of the battle, is getting the parent to recognize it. So if they're able to recognize it, kudos to those parents. And then being able to really kind of walk with them through understanding that how difficult this is for them, and that they are going to be experiencing these things in different ways, and to not be afraid that because they're isolating themselves, that because they're changing in certain patterns, not to be afraid, because then when parents are normally afraid, they tend to then withdraw. And they tend to then isolate because it's unknown and it's fearful. So they may feel like, I don't know how to approach my son or daughter. I don't know how to come to talk. So really encouraging them not to be afraid to even talk to them and bring it up, what they may notice. Because I think that's really important, is being able to just mention it and bring it up, because it also helps normalize what that experience is. It's helping them to see, I'm not different. I'm not, there's nothing wrong with me, or you're treating me different because those are some of the things that come up when I've been working with the families in the family therapy. They've been saying, you know, I feel different, or you treat me differently, or, you know, and then it causes that child to feel like, well, why are they coming to me? You know, in that aspect. But if the parents are able to approach them in a way that's curious, being very curious, and just exploring with them, and just, you know, having a conversation of what they're seeing and what they're noticing, to help invite that conversation with that child.
I love that. I love that. So not shying away from it when you notice it. Not being too intent on it because you don't want to make them feel different, and also just asking questions. I mean, that's wonderful. I love that. I think that it's so important for, I mean, you know, now that I'm a parent, I do have a different, I won't say different, but I understand some of the perspectives that parents have. But I also, you know, putting my parenting and my, you know, my experience together, we can't be afraid to address what we see. But it's all in the approach, right? You know, we have a comment about, you know, this being a good conversation for educators as well. And I 100% agree with that. Like, there are so many ways to address an issue. But if everybody is turning a blind eye to it, then, you know, that's when we see tragedy, right? Or if we, you know, we're a team, right? It doesn't matter if you are, you know, that person's teacher, or you're that person's therapist, or if you're a family member. If you notice a change, you know, we have to bring these things to light and address them, but it's all in the approach, right? Absolutely. And so if it's an emotional change, if it's a behavioral change, like, these are things that we need to address. I am full-time at a middle school, and so kids are always like not aware or unsure of like what they're feeling. And I'm like, look, you are at an age where nothing is the same, okay? School looks different. You go from elementary school where you're in one classroom all day. School looks different. You got different classes, different teachers. Your friends are different over the summer. Some of them develop, some of them don't. Some of them have new friends because you haven't seen them all year. They may come into their own. Maybe they don't like the same things you used to like. Your body's changing. Your hormones are changing. Your mood is changing. Some people's families change because they either have a new sibling, their parents get divorced, or they get remarried. I'm like, you're at an age in adolescence where nothing is the same. You're gonna have some various feelings about that, right? And so now think about the fact that nothing is already the same or staying consistent in this adolescent life. And now we're throwing on a pandemic. So school was already different because you had various teachers. And now we got sixth graders coming in who've only had one teacher their whole life. And now not only do I have 6 or 7 teachers, but I have to do this all on remote learning and figure it all out. Or like, you know, or it's March, April, and I'm just now going into school. So many things have come to cause fluctuating emotions with our kids,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so it's important for us to be mindful of what they are feeling. So we talked about how we could help a parent who's just noticing changes. Let's talk about the parent of a child um, who is expressing suicidal tendencies or thoughts or ideation and let's also talk about the difference between cutting and self-harm and suicidal thoughts, because those are very different. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, with this is actually one of a very passionate subject for me, because this is very, very close and dear to my heart, because of just what I experienced growing up in high school, losing a friend, a very, very dear friend, to actually committing suicide.
Mm.
So this is one of those things where I really am very, very passionate about making sure to really help educate parents, because I feel like when a kid is like has suicidal ideation, and it's not, necessarily always thought through. There's like little blurps and things where they're like, well, I'm going to go and just, jump out of this window, or I'm going to go and run into traffic, and, I'm going to go and grab this knife out of the kitchen. And, the parents tend to kind of feel like, oh, they're just saying that to get attention, or they're just saying that because they're upset and they're angry. And one of the things that I've always really truly appreciated about family based is it's caused me to think deeper. Because remember how we were talking earlier about how I kept saying there's just this piece missing. Like, I don't know why we're not seeing a consistent, increase in stability in these kids. It's like they'll do well for a shorter period of time, and then it's like things just start to fall apart all over again. And I've realized in family based and working with these families and working this model that it's much deeper than the words. It's much deeper than the behavior. It's much deeper than the actions. And that's the piece that we have to get to. That's the piece that we have to uncover. There's things that they're saying to get someone to be like, I need you to see me. I need you to hear me. I need you to know that I'm in pain. I need to know that you're hurting. I'm hurting. Excuse me, that I'm hurting. And they're reaching out for that parent. They're reaching out for that guardian. They're reaching out for that person that they are seeking that support from. And no kid is going to say, I'm upset because of this. Can you help me with this? No kid. I didn't even do it.
No.
I didn't do it.
Kids don't articulate that way.
You don't. That's teenagers. That's children. That's adolescents. We don't speak that way. We're still learning and trying to figure out our emotions and how they incorporate with our body and things like that. So we're still learning. So we don't have the words to be able to express it in that manner. And so the only way that we know how to express it is in those actions and those behaviors, and really helping those parents be able to look underneath of that, sense that that's an urgency and that's important and that's serious. Number one, because it is serious.
Yes.
The minute you turn a blind eye to that, you're literally teaching that child that he or she doesn't matter. And what they're experiencing, you don't have the time for. And that's what we don't ever want to teach our kids, that we're not here for them, that we don't care, that we cannot help support them, and that we don't understand. Because the minute they feel like we as parents or guardians don't understand them, that's when they seek out these other resources. They do the cutting. They seek out those risky behaviors. They start to make those suicidal ideations. And that's one of the things of working with these parents, is really helping them to look at it deeper, that when it does come up, what do you think your son or daughter is meaning? What does this mean to you? What do you hear them saying? And then when they're saying, oh, I think they want attention, being able to help reframe it for them and say, I don't really know. It seems like this. Have you ever thought about it this way? and really
Right.
help them to shift their mindset and their thought process in that. So that way they're not looking at it as my son or daughter is doing that for negative attention, for attention.
Right.
Just do this, and helping them to see it in a way that helps them to be able to be there for their kids.
Right. And if you think that they're doing it for attention, why would they need to go to that extreme to get your attention?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do you think they would need to go to that extreme? You know, I know that being working at middle school, working with children over the years, I encounter a lot of children who do self-harm, right? They're cutting, they're scratching, they're burning, even eating disorders and things like that. So they're not necessarily wanting to kill themselves.
Absolutely.
A lot of times they are in pain.
Absolutely.
And inflicting pain in other ways takes away the emotional pain. Like
Absolutely.
to a rational mind, we're like, what? But that is what they experience. And while there's so much shame, right? Because the parents feel shameful, the children feel shameful. It's like, one thing that I want parents to really get from this today is, if your child, whether they're acting out behaviorally or emotionally or, sexually, there is a problem and they are crying for help. They cannot articulate exactly what is wrong all the time, but their behavior will show that there is a problem. And as a parent, it is your job to try to figure out what is going on. And if that is just by calling for help, that's what you do. But being open to whatever is going on, right? Sometimes it's hard to hear as a parent, as a family member, as a support person, what's really going on with that child, what they're feeling, whether it's something that you perpetuated or not, whether it's something, not feeling loved or not feeling heard. Those are not things that are done intentionally, but you got to be okay with the answer. You got to look beyond what you're feeling in that moment and hear what they're saying, hear what they need. We can't invalidate their experiences because we're not living their life. We may know what we're trying to give, right? What we're trying to create in a household or as a parent, even as a support person, but we don't know what they're receiving. Right. And so if they're telling us that something is wrong, we have to listen without judgment. We have to listen without punishment. Sometimes kids are afraid because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble just by communicating what they really feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's hard to validate a child's feelings when they're being invalidated every day by their parent. You know what I mean? Or by their guardian or the person who's supposed to make them feel safest. So we have to, that's not excusing negative behavior, right? Absolutely. But in the moment of communication, they need to be able to feel heard, accepted, and loved. And then, once they're heard and they feel accepted and loved, then we can talk about consequences. Okay. Because I was that therapist, I'd be like, I validate you, I understand what you're feeling. We can work through a plan and we can talk about that, but run me that laptop, sis. Like, because you're going to need some consequences because you know better. But now you're feeling heard, loved, and secure in this relationship enough to know that there are still consequences to your behavior. So that this is not, justifying negative behavior or acting out, but getting down to the root of it. I love that you said that. I think that's one of the most important things. We all want to feel heard. We all want to feel understood, and so even if it was, your spouse, and you would feel awful if you expressed your experience and it was totally invalidated.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, for a child who already has a hard time communicating, to feel completely invalidated it's not a healthy headspace for children who don't have the emotional intelligence to say, okay, this is an irrational thought. Let me not do this. Listen, the suicide rate is already way too high.
Very high. Very high.
And COVID is definitely having a negative impact on that. right? Like we're seeing there have been a lot of attempts, there have been a lot of successful deaths, and if even just having this conversation can help a parent or an educator or a therapist or a family member, support person, just recognize signs of change, right? Please, please point it out. You know what that does when you notice that a child is being different or acting differently? It's letting them know that they are being noticed, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And even if they're defensive, deep down inside, they're happy that you're watching them. They're happy that you're noticing their changes. And that can encourage them to even do better. Like, you don't see yourself today. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine. I'm just not feeling it today. Okay. But I'm watching you. That makes them feel loved and supported. So, woo, child. It's tough working with children. It is, because you just want to just fix it, right? Like, I need to just fix this, yes. But you can't, right? Because you're not the parent, you're not. But so how do you balance that in your life? Like, you have these severe cases.
It's hard.
How do you not want to be like, look, boo, you coming home with me tonight?
It's really, really hard, because there are times where, I'm able to see, like, okay, I can see this in this kid, but why can't this parent? And like, literally, like, having multiple sessions after sessions, just like with the parent, and like that parent just struggles to get it. That's where it becomes difficult, because it's like, how can I then take a step back and still not look at this parent as incapable, but look at it through, how is this parent, like, what's the barriers for this parent that's impacting them to be able to see what we're seeing and to connect it to the way that we're connecting it. And like, that's literally been the struggle, is literally having to take a step back and be like, let me find the positive, because there are those parents that trigger me very much trigger me. And being able to recognize that is wonderful, because if I don't acknowledge that the parent triggers me, I can't go in there with my partner and do the work. I'm always going to have a barrier to be able to do the best work. And I'm either going to align with the client, which is not always good, and I'm not going to be able to have that good balance of alliance with both the parent and the child. And so recognizing that I get triggered by that parent, and then trying to figure out, through having those multiple sessions with the parent, like exploring their history, exploring them.
Exactly.
Because that's the piece that then helps me to then connect, like, oh, they're their daughter. They're not this 40-year-old or 35-year-old mom or 40-something-year-old mom that's raising this adolescent child. They are literally, they've experienced trauma that they never dealt with. They've had a ruptured relationship with their parents. They've probably had poor relationships in their family. And now they're not an adult. They're a child, because
they're this is stuck in that trauma brain,
right at the cusp. So while I'm sitting here trying to like push this parent to get them to connect, I've got to do some more work in understanding that parent and joining with that parent more, to be able to figure out that parent's story. And when I can understand that parent's story better, then my triggers become lessened, and I can be able to connect to that parent and say, they're not incapable, or they just don't get it. They're
some stuck in their own stuff.
And they can't, and that their children, that child's probably triggered them.
Exactly.
Why they're acting
they're back in their trauma.
Saying, oh, well, they're just doing it for attention, because they probably experienced that same trauma, or they probably did that same self-harm, or same suicidal ideation, and it didn't get them anywhere. And they had to learn how to survive. And it's like, well, I survived. I did it. Why can't my son or daughter do it? And it's like, how do I help you? How do I help you be able to connect to your trauma is impacting you, and you may be being triggered by your son or daughter? And how do we help you to be able to make that connection that you haven't healed? And how do we help you?
That's why you're the expert. I mean, I love it. It's so true. And that is why family therapy is so important, right? Because you come in for one reason, but there's so many things that you got to unpack, and you have to unpack the parent stuff. If you are a parent or a guardian or an adoptive parent or a foster parent, or, if you have a child that you are caring for who has emotional or behavioral concerns, right? Or they're acting out in some way, shape, or form. If you're having a hard time getting through to them, that's stressful. So you need your own support. But if you are a parent or guardian and you're having a hard time empathizing and understanding your child and providing that loving environment where they know that they can, have the safety to work on their stuff, or they can go through this with you hand in hand. If you're having a hard time with that, you also may need to process your own stuff, even if you just don't understand, because there are times we come across and the parent is like, your typical normal family, if we can say normal, right? So you got your 2-parent household, the parents are working, they're not financially struggling. And then the kid is like, oh, my life is falling apart. And you're like, shoot, I would live here. Like, this is a nice house. You know what I mean? But there's still issues. But that, you can't invalidate that either. Because just because you give them everything you may not have as a child, don't mean you're giving the love and emotional support that you may have. But there might be some missing pieces.
That's key. That's
so as a parent, right? As a parent, as a guardian, as a support person, if you have a child that has emotional issues, you yourself need to also be in therapy. Let's just get right down to the point. Find you a therapist, okay? Because it's already stressful, but there may be some things that need to be unpacked in your life in order to really show that support for your child. It's just, working with children is so complex because it's all connected. It's impossible to separate the two, right? Even when we do marriage counseling, right? Like I can work with the wife, but the husband has to be involved in some way, shape, or form, because as I improve that, work to help that wife improve, the husband's going to be like, hold up, you changing. And then she's going to be like, that's what I'm paying for, to change. That's what I tell people all the time. Why they mad you changing? That's why you pay me, so you can change, right? But if y'all not going to change together, there's going to be an issue. Right. Same thing with the child, right? You guys have to be on the same page of forward movement and progression. Steph, you are the best above all the rest. I'm so
okay. Well, thank you.
I'm just so this is such a wonderful conversation. I do want to talk a little bit about the behavioral side, right? Because that's a little bit more frustrating. When the child is like throwing desk at teachers and, turning the classroom out. How do you support? What advice would you give to support that parent?
So, again, I always feel like there's something that goes back to what's causing this. And so, I always let families know, like, your kid just didn't wake up and just start becoming physical and aggressive. Like, they just don't just wake up and say, you know what, today
I'm going to turn tables like Jesus.
I'm just going to run all the way up today and just start throwing stuff and hitting and punching. Like, no kid just wakes up and does that. And so, again, when you're talking about the behaviors, I also believe that some of these behaviors you also have to look at too, just like the mental health side. There could be certain things that are going on that are impacting, that have impacted, that child that you don't necessarily think would impact until later. It could be something neurological in the brain, development, like when the parent was carrying, the mom was carrying them in utero. Like, there are so many different things we just don't know, that we can't identify because we just don't have the tools and things to be able to do that. And so sometimes we're now seeing things that like transpire and happen in a certain age. It could also be, again, trauma is very, very significant and intense, and there's various levels of trauma. You could get a child that could just be in an environment where they're constantly around gun violence all the time, or they're around someone who's physically abusive, domestic violence, and they may have just grown up watching that in the early developmental life of their years, to the point where now that they're older, this is how now they communicate and incorporate those things, because they may have seen it. And a lot of times I get a lot of parents that are like, well, they were only 2 years old, or they were only 1. I left the dad, right after. And it's like, a lot of families don't realize that even when you're pregnant, you can give off stress. Your body experiences a level of stress. And so you could be pregnant with that child, and if you're in a domestic violence situation or even experiencing trauma of some sort, your body is going to naturally react. And we don't know to what magnitude, that while you're carrying that baby, that there could be damage and things that are happening. And so even take it a little bit further, we don't know if that parent was hitting that mom in the stomach, any part of the body. Any of those things could have impacted that child's brain to now it could have shifted something as they're growing and developing and their body is changing. Something could have shifted internally to the point where now that kid is starting to become more escalated with aggression. And so, I would always encourage a parent to, seek those things to the doctor and just get those things checked out and help them to make that connection, because there are things that we can't physically see on the outside that could be impacting. And as parents are describing these things, or teachers are describing these things, that's when I would highly suggest and say, well, you know what? I would suggest doing some assessments. I would suggest getting some additional testing, because I said, I wonder if there's something going on neurologically or cognitively that's impacting this child, that it's a typical response of, I asked you to do something and now you're escalating and you're flipping out.
Right.
That's what we're used to. And we're going to categorize it as oppositional defiant disorder. And if it's too severe, then we're borderline going to call it conduct disorder.
Right.
But it may be something else that might be needing to be looked at with a medical issue, because we just don't know. And so I'm not a big advocate about medicine all the time, because I definitely feel like we need to just understand that medicine is only going to do a percentage of the work, but then the other work is the therapy. And you really have to do the work together. And I would approach it the same way as the physical aggression. Like, there's something going on. And if you have any knowledge of being able to explore, like, what's going on with this child and like the environment, the upbringing, like family dynamics, family situation, things like that, it may help be able to point some things out, to be able to be like, oh, well, they live in this type of environment, or, it's a lot of physical altercations in the home, or, and things like that. And so you can't then expect this kid who grows up in an environment where fighting is their only way of communicating, and then expecting them to be able to completely transition and
go to school and somebody step on their shoe and you think they're not gonna punch them, right?
Exactly.
Like, this is what they know to be normal, right?
Exactly. That's their exactly.
I love that. And I'm gonna I made some connections, but I'm also doing some research on myself too about like
Mhm.
the impact of nutrition and mental health, right? And so one of the things that our body does with sugar, it breaks that down, and the way we metabolize that, it has a huge impact on our mood. So not only may they have a violent environment, but they also may have very poor nutrition
Right.
where their main source of energy is just sugar and carbs that is spiking their hormone levels, spiking their cortisol levels, spiking all kind of, levels within them that they can't regulate their emotions even if they wanted to, because they're just, their blood sugar levels are spiking. That has a direct impact. So there are so many things that can impact a child's behavior, but it all starts with, number one, noticing those changes, right? If you're noticing things that are not right, I was trying to, I'm sure you probably know off the top of your head, but I did want to let everybody at least know, if you're in the state of Delaware, that we do have a crisis hotline for children. What's the number? 1-800-969.
Hold on one second. 1-800.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I know it's
1-800-969-HELP, or it's 4357.
Yes, 4357. I don't know how I don't remember that number as many times as I had to give it out. But I appreciate everyone who tuned in and was involved in the chat. I really appreciate everyone's input. Steph, I super, super, super appreciate you, even for being accommodating with the time change. Sorry, guys, had a little double booked myself. So thanks for tuning in an hour earlier than usual. I want to keep, we're going to have you back for a part 2, because I'm definitely going to want to keep this conversation going, because it's just so important. As adults, we have a hard time with our own stuff. You want to make sure you're doing right by your children and the kids that you serve, but it's complex, and so there is definitely nothing wrong with reaching out for your own help. But if you're unsure about anything, feel free to call, feel free to ask. There's also a crisis text line, and I'm gonna put that out there too, because if you're an educator or a parent and your child may not be in therapy yet, but you're looking for that, there is a crisis text line, and I'm gonna put it in the chat. If you type connect and you text it to 741-741, this is a crisis text line where someone will actually talk to you if you are if you feel like you need someone to talk to, you're not sure who to go to. First line of defense. It is a crisis and you're not sure what to do and you're considering harming yourself. Maybe you just, it's after hours and you feel bad for contacting your therapist, or I don't know. But if you want to, you can text connect to 741-741. And I believe that's for children and adults. So anyone can text this number and it'll get you in contact with a crisis hotline counselor. Stephanie, I cannot thank you enough. First of all, you are my friend and I love you dearly. And
I love you too. Thank you.
Has been such an amazing part of my life, and I so enjoyed working next to you at our days in Delaware Guidance, and I can't wait until Stephanie's what did I call it? Dang it! What did I call it?
Stephanie's Healing
House. Right? I'm making Stephanie start her business. So when Stephanie's Healing House is open and ready, and she can move y'all in her house in Ayala Van Zant fashion and do some, some acute 72-hour lock-in. We getting down to the bottom of this, call a thing, and we're going to call you out on your stuff and make sure that we get your family together. I'll keep you posted with Stephanie Healing House is ready to roll. Any last words of encouragement or anything for the parents or the kids out there?
I think the most important thing is always be curious. Always come from a place of being curious, because that leaves the door open for them to not feel defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps to be able to open up that gap for communication more. And it brings that connection more to feeling understood and being able to validate and talk about these things that may be uncomfortable, but being more curious and not being afraid to say
Mm-hmm.
something. And that we don't always have the answers either, even though we're therapists. As a parent also, we don't have
Amen.
the answers. So, it's a learning process, but the intentions that you present to your child, and just being curious and just being there for them and just
Mm-hmm.
spending that time is much, much more important than anything that we could give them, that we can purchase for them. And that, mental health affects all of us. And that, mental health was rampant back in the days. It's just, it probably wasn't identified. And so
Mm-hmm.
just being understanding that their struggles are going to be different, and to just make sure to be supportive and understanding and not to give up.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time, Stephanie, and being a guest tonight on Self-Care Sound Mind, the podcast. I'm super excited for next week's episode, not next week, 2 weeks, our next episode, episode 5. We are going to be talking about men and mental health. So thanks for tuning in. Have a good night, and stay tuned for everything that's coming up. Also, don't forget, support our free mental health campaign. Buy a shirt with a purpose. $20. You can go to embracingoak.com. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.
Bye.